See, look at this stuff. I have the full screen going. I can learn. All right, now if only my mouse keeps up with me. So we have a few things on the agenda today, our normal updates. Our special topic for today will be the history of Earth Day. And we have a special topic because of a situation that has arisen in the last week, and Nick will be kind enough to speak to that. And that will be with regards to helping save the Onaway Elementary School native gardens. And then we'll leave it open for open discussion towards the end, because I think that was really well received last time, where it was a good time to maybe just even ask general questions about native plants or talk about ideas. So we just want to hear from you and give that time open. But a lot of things going on with regards to the chapter. So since our last meeting, we have 2 new members, Michelle and Christoph. I don't believe either one of them are on the line, but we're very excited to have them. And if anyone on the line is not already a member, I did include the link, or if you are interested in learning more, feel free to send us a message, or as you'll see later on in the presentation, we actually have an information session that we'll be doing on May 1st for potential new members. For those that did not attend our meeting last month, we actually had a seed and social event. So it was really well received. We had a lot of volunteers come and help us out. We packaged seeds, a lot of common milkweed, as well as a lot of variety of native seeds. So as you can see from the pictures here, I'm very excited, allowed us to pack up these free seed packets that we'll also be handing out at events. And we also fold the brochures, things along those lines. So appreciate everyone that was able to attend. All right, so next, so for Julie, unfortunately, was not able to attend tonight. As you guys know, she is starting up her new location for her native nursery. So very exciting things here. But she is our web chair, and she did have some updates. So our website is up and running finally, but we are still in the process of updating certain pieces. Specifically, one of the ones that we're focusing on first is the resources tab. We had some early notes as to the local native nurseries within the Northeast Ohio area, as well as some plant sales. Thank you for all of you guys' help in gathering some of that information. I know several of you guys provide us some additional information, and Julie just let me know that she intends to have that piece updated by end of day tomorrow. So as long as everything goes well, look for that there. If we missed anything after that date, please let us know. We want to make sure that we do keep that resource tab as up to date as possible for yourselves or other members, or just even in general as a great tab to be able to reference for that information. Next, Earth Day events. So we have 2 events that we'll be attending. That will be the Akron Zoo this Saturday and LCC this upcoming Wednesday. But we did make a post on social media, I believe it was on Monday, asking for you guys to share with us all the other great Earth Day events, because we cover all of Northeast Ohio, and that's a lot of area to cover, right? So if you guys hear of something really cool going on, please tack onto that post in the comments section, because we want to make everyone, no matter where they're located at in Northeast Ohio, aware of all these great opportunities going on. Unfortunately, I know the weather looks like it's going to not be the best on Saturday, but we would still love to see you guys share all those other great activities going on. With regards to other chapter updates, we have the Andrew J. Rickoff Science Fair Day on 5/10. Now Ray, who also was not able to attend today, is looking for 1 or 2 more volunteers. We've switched from planting common milkweed to native sunflower. And the reason for that being is when talking about the germination and how long it takes for it to start to pop up, there's a little bit of concern with elementary school kids, like taking home or just end up throwing away because they didn't see something within a couple of weeks. So we decided to switch our track with regards to this. So these 1 or 2 volunteers, Ray will be taking charge of, like, you know, what to teach them in the 30-minute increments roughly. But we just need an extra pair of hands or two to help with the kids and planting those seeds. So if you have time on Wednesday, May 10th, from roughly 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., I would really appreciate your help in helping with the kids with this activity. If you are interested, please send us an email or message us through social media, and we'd be happy to have you. Some other items, we are looking for a new secretary. So Danielle has been doing a wonderful job. We really appreciate all of her help with regards to helping us in this position. But some things are coming up where we have some opportunities, and one of Danielle's great passions, for those that know, she works for the colleges and has the specialty gardens, but in addition to that, she's very passionate about environmental justice and land restoration and rescues. So we want to give her that chance to focus more on those types of activities. And that means that we are looking for a new secretary, but thankfully, you know, she's been kind enough, and we'll stay on in that position until we do find a new one. So if this is something that does interest you, please let us know. Same thing with regards to the treasurer position. This is a very important position within chapters because once we have a treasurer, we'll be able to start accepting donations and doing applying for grants, things along those lines that can help with some of these other activities that are goals of our chapters. Other items that we're looking for help in, we're looking for an activity event coordinator to help us, you know, plan and make sure, you know, our events are running fairly smoothly ahead of time. Any of the upcoming events, which we have many more than one we've already mentioned, social media, marketing, membership committee, learning committee are just a few of the things that come to mind. So whether you're interested in one of those positions, those activities, or maybe something else, or you just want to talk about how maybe you can personally contribute in a different way, please don't hesitate to reach out to us because every little bit helps. Any questions before I move on? Steph, if anybody puts something in the chat, please let me know. Okay. Another person that was not able to be here tonight, but who's been kind enough to volunteer their time is Laura has joined the new membership committee. And we're really excited because a couple reasons is with us starting to do more and more events like Earth Days and, you know, other tabling events, we expect to get more and more people interested in becoming a member and just overall helping with regards to some of the membership duties. Laura has stepped up and has been kind enough to do this. And also, hopefully it'll give Steph a little bit of break as she starts prepping for her wedding coming up this summer. So very excited to have Laura on the team to help out with that. Steph, anything you want to add on that?
No, I'll just say that Laura and I sat down last weekend and did her sort of orientation to how she can help with the membership committee, and she's just got fantastic energy. So if you get the chance to interact with her, you totally should. We found out that we actually work in very similar fields, so we had a really nerdy conversation about our jobs for about 30 minutes, which was great. Yeah, so just, you know, if next time you see her, if you're in person at an event, feel free to say hello to Laura. She's fantastic, and we're so glad to have her.
Thank you, Steph. All right. There we go. Steph, any updates that you would like to share with regards to Learning Committee?
No updates at this point, except for, and I think you might have already talked about this, the event that's coming up this upcoming Tuesday, which is the soil workshop or a soil seminar. We're calling It Starts with Soil, where we're going to be talking about how you can best prepare your garden for, you know, plants and whatever else you want to install in your native garden by first making sure that your soil's ready to go. I am personally very excited to learn about soil testing and what to do with the results of those soil tests. So we've got Jen and Sonia from Native Roots who are going to come and talk to us about soil for a bit. So that's going to be really exciting. If you haven't heard about the event yet, please feel free to check our Facebook page or the chapter update that was sent out, I think last week. We've got details in there. It is totally free. It's going to be totally virtual. So all you have to do is just log in at 7 o'clock next Tuesday, and you'll be able to learn about some soil. If you're not able to make it next Tuesday, we will be recording the session. So we'll be able to put that in the resources area of our website as well. Yeah, so I think it's going to be great. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Great, thanks, Steph. The other thing I just want to say with regards to Learning Committee is the more volunteers we have, the more unique opportunities that are available. So one of the really cool things that came out of the latest sessions is obviously from that Ground Up series, which will be a whole series of webinars and or in-person events and different topics. Obviously, from it starts with soil is that very first one that we're launching with. But we are always looking for more members to be a part of this committee, because then we can do more things, whether it's a full-on webinar like we're talking about coming up here this Tuesday, to maybe it's social media posts or other little micro videos or presentations, or there's so many different things that can encompass. And the great thing is you do not necessarily need to be knowledgeable. You just have to be willing to help and possibly research some of these topics and coming up with ideas. So Steph can tell you, she's a beginner with native plants, so am I. But that's what actually sort of triggered this series is, getting to the basics for new people to native plants. So like I said, no matter your level of experience, every little bit helps. All right, pollinator pathway. All right, so guys, really excited with regards to this project. So in our last session, we regrouped on a few things. And one of the key ones is we started talking a little bit about, what makes this pathway project a little bit different than the other ones that might be out there. And one of those being is that there's sort of going to be different levels to this. The big focus, though, is just starting at the very basic level, which most people are familiar with. So that way, it's something that's available to anyone who has even the smallest of yards, with those little, kits and things along those lines. But some of the things we talked about is wanting to have sort of different levels for a different term, or layers, I should say. And we talked about how, like, Save the Bees has a Bee Campus USA. And we thought, oh, well, maybe we can do something like that with local colleges. And I know Danielle's really excited about an idea like that. Or Arbor Day has Tree City USA. Is there something we can do with regards to that? So we're looking at the different layers that we might want to have as a part of this overall project. Keeping in mind, we're obviously not going to launch all those levels at the same time, but as a part of having that conversation, we revisited the idea of the naming convention. So right now, the two leading names for the project and or for the sign is looking like it will be either Northeast Ohio Native Habitat Corridor or Northeast Ohio Native Pollinator Pathway. So those are the top considerations. There's still other things on the table, and we'll be working on re-presenting that to the larger group. But that is some of the latest information with regards to, oh, I apologize. We do have an update from the artist. So we're hoping that we might have a draft version of what the sign might look like within the next week or two. So no promises, since that's based off of his timeline. But we're really excited to see what might come out of that. And just like with the Learning Committee, anyone's that's a member is welcome to join that project team. The nice thing about a project a project like ours is that you can hop in and out of meetings. There's not necessarily the commitment as like some of the other positions we've talked about. You can just attend, have your voices heard. Maybe down the line, there might be little pieces of homework depending on who's volunteering for what, but right now it's about us talking about ideas more so than anything else. So more the merrier. Any questions with regards to pollinator pathway?
I just want to share that I talked to a number of people, probably 5 or 6 in the last week, about this initiative. And they were so excited. And how are we going to get the message out? And when do they sign up? So at least in my area, there's a lot of interest.
That's great to hear, Jane.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
yeah.
for talking it up as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the signage, I told them how really attractive it was, and they would be proud to have it in their tree lawn or their yard. And they thought that would be a very good way to communicate to neighbors and other people. So
Okay.
yeah,
Thank
good
you.
steps.
Jane,
right.
Danielle is giving you some applause in the chat. So thank you for spreading the word.
Yay. Oh yeah, I mean, I was surprised how enthusiastic they were.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to introduce people to it or have people start a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really, really great way to do that. All right, so upcoming chapter events and activities. I know we talked about a few, but we have a lot on the table, and this is what you're seeing even just for the next month. We have much more even on the calendar. So, and Steph, Danielle, keep me honest if I missed something. So obviously this Saturday, we will be tabling at the Akron Zoo. We will be partnering with the Youngstown chapter to present and share information. We'll have seed packets. There might be a few giveaways. So if you have kids, especially, there's even like a little pollinator questionnaire, which I really love that the zoo put this together, that anybody that's tabling at this event, they're supposed to go to each of the tables and get questions answered, and they win prizes. So it was a really great way thing that the zoo is doing. So we're really excited to work with them on that. And then we have the Earth Day event at LCC on Wednesday, and that's from 10 to 2. So we'll be tabling there as well. But Steph, Danielle, is there anything you else you want to add with regards to the LCC event?
Well, it's promising to be really, really great. So there's going to be a ton of community partners there representing a lot of different directions in the world of sustainability, including, beekeepers and a lot of farmers, conservation organizations. So kind of a wide spectrum of representatives there. We'll have different tables featuring different things. The Black River Audubon Society will be there, raffling off some items. There's going to be a plant sale. The plant sale will have a lot of vegetables and herbs, but also native plants, and everything is super, super affordable. So it's a really great way to come and network and meet a lot of really great people all at once. So it'd be really great if you guys could make it.
And Danielle, if I remember correctly, it's cash only for the plant sale, correct?
Correct. The funds go into the student enrichment program, helping students who are maybe underprivileged, who would like to further their education and things. But yeah, it's cash only. But I mean, if you brought a $5 bill, you would leave with at least 5 plants. I mean, it's very affordable, and all of the plants are grown through our plant propagation and crop production classes.
Great, thank you, Danielle. All right, so obviously a very exciting opportunity there. And then as Steph had mentioned, the first series From the Ground Up kicks off on Tuesday, on April 25th from 7 to 8. This will be a webinar, so please attend. If you can't make it, obviously we'll be recording it, but we're really excited to start off this series. And then on Monday, May 1st, we'll have Wild Ones informational session. So this is really targeted, especially for anybody that's either new to Wild Ones and just wants to learn a little bit more. We're going to be introducing Wild Ones at these tabling events. So we wanted, since we have a couple of them, we wanted to make sure we have a webinar that we can talk to them as a group. It's just a little bit easier on staff and team than trying to reach out to everyone individually. But this is also a great time, if you know friends or family members that might be interested in learning a little bit more about Wild Ones, invite them to this. This is a really great time to, raise your hand, ask questions, learn a little bit more, and just, like I said, spread the word. And then we have our next Pollinator Pathway Project meeting on Thursday, May 4th. And then very excited, but one of the larger plant sales going on is going to be May 13th. So Cuyahoga County Metro Parks is having 5 locations with native plant sales. So we're going to try to be a part of this, and we are looking for volunteers. Based on the number of volunteers we have, might depend on how many locations we're trying to do. So right now we're looking at possibly 1 to 2 because of what I've already had volunteer from an officer perspective. However, the more that you guys volunteer to, attend these type of activities, we might be able to do a few others. So we're looking for probably anywhere from 2 to 4 people at each location. But like I said, if you're interested, send us an email or message us, and we'll add you onto the list. But these 5 locations are spread throughout Cuyahoga County. Like I remember there's one at Parma, there's the Rocky River Reservation, I think there's the Chagrin one, and I think there's, like I said, 1 or 2 others. Yeah, like I said, we'll figure that out as we come a little bit closer based off of the number of volunteers we have. Mentioned the Andrew J. Rickoff Science Day Fair. We're looking, like I said, for 1 to 2 volunteers. And then our May chapter meeting will be on Thursday, May 18th. And then we'll be doing the Shaker Heights First Baptist Church, installing the native plant garden with Anne sometime in May. That's going to be based off of the weather. So that's just May alone. Steph, Danielle, did I miss anything?
So Danielle actually wanted to talk about another event that she's got coming up. So Danielle?
Just real quick. So I have 2 things I wanted to mention. Neither of them have set dates yet, but we are in the works on making those happen. We've got a workshop that I'll be leading called What Plants Where as part of the Learning Committee from the Ground Up series. That should be towards the end of May. We're looking at May 27th, waiting for that to be confirmed, but you guys will be updated on that. The other thing is that, speaking of plant rescue, Jessica had, we have a pressing need to rescue native plants from a native prairie at the college that I work for. Details aside, story aside, that's just something to look for. If that's something that might interest you, volunteers who help us rescue those plants will take a large portion or all of the ones they rescue home. It's just a matter of not letting them just be destroyed. So if that's something that interests you, make sure that you let us know and take a look at our chapter updates to make sure that you land that date. Again, that'll be towards the end of May. So something to look forward to.
So just to recap, because I know that's been a moving target, Danielle, you're saying that it has to be done by the end of May now for that?
We are looking towards the end of May, first week of June. It just,
Okay.
that's when the plants will have their, our late blooming plants will have shown their leaves, but they're not sending all of their power into their blooms just yet. So it seems like it's going to be the most decent time. Also, it's a little urgent because they are going to pave a parking lot over it pretty soon.
Yeah. All right, Danielle, thank you for that latest update, because I know you'd had a lot going on, and we were waiting to hear some of those updates. So thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure we provide a slide and start sharing that on social media then. And let us know if you want to target a specific date, so people can start being prepared, or if you just want them on a waiting list, you know, like we'll figure out the logistics on that. All right. Any questions before we move on?
Yeah, I have a question, quick question. I signed up for the Akron Zoo event, but I didn't really hear anything back. So do I just show up at 9:30 and go from there, or is there a contact person
You
that I?
didn't get, you didn't get an email, Diane?
No.
Did you sign up through the
Mm,
survey link?
I don't remember how I
Right.
signed up. I
Dan, do me a
apologize.
favor, send me an email, because I did actually send out the instructions for it. It was either yesterday or the day before. So I just
Okay.
want to make sure. So thank you for calling that out.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure you get the full set of instructions. So
All right, I'll send that.
but the time to arrive is between 9 and 9:30.
Okay.
And in the instructions, it'll show you where to park and what entrance to come through and things like that.
Okay.
So
All right.
thank
Thank
for
you.
that.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. All right, Steph, you ready to take this?
I am so ready. No, I had a lot of fun putting together this month's educational topic. As the learning committee got together last month, and we were kind of looking towards, you know, what educational topics do we want to cover in the next few months? We landed on, you know, it's April 20th. Earth Day is here in a couple days, so we're really close. We figured it'd be a really good time just to kind of remind folks of what the history of Earth Day is. Where did this come from? How did it start? What are we trying to do? Where is it going? So we're going to just talk about that for a little bit. And then as I was doing my research, it was really interesting to see how much the history of Northeast Ohio is actually kind of connected to the emergence of the movement for environmentalism in the US in the late 20th century. So if we were all together in a room, I'd ask for a show of hands, but some of you might be familiar with the beer company, Great Lakes Brewing Company, and they have a beer that is called Burning River Pale Ale. If you're like me and you're not originally from Ohio, you might be wondering, why is it called Burning River? What's that about? Well, this is actually a reference to a fire that took place on the river in 1969. So on June 22nd of 1969, the Cuyahoga River actually burst into flames when there were sparks from a train that passed by, and the sparks from the train set fire to some debris that was soaked in oil and was floating on the water's surface. Now, this 1969 fire is the most well-known fire on the Cuyahoga River, but actually the river has caught fire several times earlier in the 20th century, and it just never really got a ton of coverage because everyone kind of assumed, you know, in Cleveland being an industrial town, it was just kind of, hey, that's the cost of progress. That's the cost we have to pay if we want to industrialize and move forward and progress as a country. So when I looked into the history of this, you can see here that there are no less than 10 times that the Cuyahoga River has caught on fire from 1868 all the way up to 1969. So this was not the first time that this was going to happen, but it was the one that got the most coverage. Jess, if we could go to the next slide. Excuse me. So Time magazine actually covered the 1969 fire, but when they did that, they published a photo that was actually from an earlier and more damaging fire on the river that took place in 1952. So the 1969 fire actually wasn't the most dramatic one, but because of this little editorial mishap, it ended up looking like it was a bigger event than it really was, and it got a ton of attention. The 1969 fire actually came after a 1968 passage of a $100 million bond initiative to fund the cleanup of the river. So even before the 1969 fire, citizens of Cleveland already understood that this environmentalism thing was kind of important, and maybe we should clean up our waterways, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure that water in the river is not supposed to catch on fire. We really don't like that, and we don't like to see that. So while that initial fire in 1969 didn't receive a ton of attention, because of the editorial mishap at Time magazine and because of the growing environmentalism movement, it became a symbol for that movement as we moved into the 70s. Jess, if we could move to the next slide. And that is so convenient because April 1970 is when we had the first Earth Day. So Senator Gaylord Nelson created Earth Day in 1970 as a way to kind of force the issue of environmentalism onto the national agenda. So he created this, declared that this was going to be Earth Day. And as a result, 20 million Americans demonstrated on the first Earth Day across the country in all sorts of different US cities to raise awareness for the cause of environmentalism. As you can see here, here's a picture from the first Earth Day in 1970, where Fifth Avenue in New York City was absolutely chock-a-block, filled with thousands of people marching and demonstrating for the cause of environmentalism. And so following that, in December of 1970, and again, as a result of the work of Senator Nelson, Congress authorized the creation of a new federal agency that was dedicated to tackling environmental issues, and that was the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. Jess, if we could move to the next slide. This one is so cool to see. Just because sometimes I think when we are in the current day and we're trying to get movement on issues that matter to us, it's really easy to think that things are moving too slowly, we're not getting enough done, and we're never going to make progress. And I really like looking at this list because this is just the list of following the first Earth Day in 1970 up to 1980. This is how much legislation got passed related to environmentalism. And this is a lot of what is fundamental to our national environmentalism movement. So that includes, but it's not limited to, things like the Clean Water and Air Act, the Water Quality Improvement Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Toxic Substances Control Act. These are all really important things. The Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, and some of these, if you think about not even just, current events in Ohio, we've had a number of sort of environmentally concerning events in Ohio just this year, but also the history of Ohio, especially if you go into the northern parts of Ohio, the eastern parts of Ohio, we have some connections to mining. And what is the environmental impact of that? And so trying to control for that. So it is really cool to see what can get done when people are dedicated to making something happen. So I just like to look at this list and remind myself that this all exists because someone said, hey, I don't think rivers are supposed to catch on fire. I don't think, smog is supposed to blanket, my city so that I can't see the sunrise and the sunset. I don't think that's supposed to happen. We should definitely do something about that. Jess, if we could move to the next slide. So then let's go back to Cleveland. What about Cleveland? We talked about the environmentalism movement at a national level, but what about Cleveland? Well, environmental legislation wasn't always easy. And initially, President Nixon vetoed the Clean Water Act in 1972 because he was concerned about the price tag. However, thankfully, the Senate voted to override his veto and they passed the Clean Water Act into law. Which was really important because only a couple years earlier, scientists had concluded that Lake Erie was actually dying due to pollution that was raising phosphorus levels in the lake. And so some of you might be familiar with phosphorus is a chemical that is commonly found in agricultural, sort of industrial fertilizers. And so as a result of runoff, that phosphorus was going into the lake, and those elevated phosphorus levels were leading to algal blooms. So these are just big blooms of algae that were threatening the well-being of the lake. I had to do a little bit of research to understand this, like what is an algal bloom and why is it bad? Basically what happens with algal blooms is they can radically raise the pH level, sort of like the acidity level of the water that it's in. And it can also affect the ability of animals like fish and other marine life to actually be able to access oxygen in the water. So when we talk about the lake dying from these phosphorus levels going up, it is quite literally fish were dying, marine life was dying. So this was actually a pretty big concern for folks living around Lake Erie and around the Great Lakes more generally, but particularly Lake Erie because, this was killing off the river. killing off the lakes. And so that Clean Water Act was really important to get passed in 1972 so that we could start to address the causes of that. Jess, if we could move to the next slide, you'll see that in addition to the Clean Water Act that was passed in 1972, the US and Canada actually had 2 Great Lakes water quality agreements in 1972 and in 1978, where they agreed that they would begin the process of cleaning the Great Lakes. And so it was federal legislation like the Clean Water Act that provided the means to address those new threats or those existing threats to what is the largest freshwater system in the world. Like the Great Lakes are great for a reason. It's not just because they're a ton of fun or that they're really pretty. They are the largest freshwater system on the entire planet. And so it is very important that we are able to protect them and preserve that for later generations. Jess, if we could move to the next slide. So we talked about Cleveland. I also want to talk about something called the Montreal Protocol. In the 1970s, again, along with that environmentalism movement, scientists were able to identify that increased fossil fuel usage was having a really negative impact on the environment and particularly on the ozone shield. So the ozone shield, if you're not familiar with the concept of the ozone shield, this is a layer of ozone gas that is really high up in our atmosphere around the planet. And that ozone shield actually protects us from the majority of the damaging ultraviolet radiation that comes from the sun. So when that ozone shield began to degrade, you can see over here on the right, we have sort of this visualization of what that heat map would look like. So as the ozone shield was degrading, that top left corner, that's in 1979. And that shows, like, you can see these little bits of orange and yellow where the atmosphere is really starting to warm up. And there's very, very little of that deep blue, which is what we want to see. But as a result of these efforts following the Montreal Protocol, we see that in 1989, which is at the top right, we do start to see more of that blue. And then as we progress to, 2006 and then 2010, in that lower quadrant there, you can see that the ozone layer has actually begun to heal, which is really cool. So in 1987, every country in the world joined the Montreal Protocol to ban CFCs, which are a major ozone depleting pollutant. And in 2010, scientists were able to report that the ozone shield was beginning to recover. This is actually really, really cool, just to know that, like, just that kind of effort, it was a big effort, it was a collective effort, but it is having a positive impact, and we are starting to see improvement in that ozone shield. And so ozone depleting emissions are actually down 99% since 1979. And so the ozone layer is projected to return to 1980 levels by the middle of this century. Now, we would still love to see it happen faster than that, but we are on track to actually make some improvement to all the environmental damage that we've seen in the past 30, 40 years. So this, I think, is really important to remind ourselves, is like, it's very easy sometimes when we talk about environmentalism and climate change, it's very easy to kind of get into a really doom and gloom state of things because, we can see so much bad that is happening. But I think this is a great reminder that if we all come together and decide that we want to change things and we want to say, hey, we've got to make this better, we absolutely can do that. So I just thought that was a really good reminder for us to end on. Jess, I think we've got one slide left, and that's to talk about Earth Day 2023. So the theme of Earth Day 2023 is that we need to invest in our planet. This theme was selected because it highlights the importance of dedicating our time, our resources, our energy to solving climate change and those other environmental issues. So investing in our planet is necessary to protect it. And the best way that we can pave a path towards that really prosperous future that we all want for our planet and for ourselves. So some of the ways that we can invest in Earth Day is investing in things like regenerative agriculture, investing in food security, the restoration of biodiversity, which is a big focus of this organization. That's the main reason that Wild Ones exists, is to promote that restoration of biodiversity. We can also invest in the green economy and bigger, more sort of general efforts to restore climate. That is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few things that I was able to pick from earthday.org of ideas or topics that you can look into if you want to research these further. But I think, this is a really good jumping off point for us to think about. What are you going to do on Earth Day to invest in our planet? And so if you want to learn more about this, you can go to earthday.org to find out more about how you can take action. Or, we could make things really easy for you. If you'd like to volunteer for a Wild Ones Earth Day event, please just let us know, because we would love to see you there. We would love for you to join us as we continue to promote the restoration of our local biodiversity. And that's all I've got. That's all I've got on Earth Day, Jess. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move on, any questions, or does anybody want to say what they're doing for Earth Day or some of their goals?
I can speak real quick if you want. I organized a invasive species cleanup out at school. So we put out the call to current families and alumni and community members, and I don't know how many people will show up, but we're going to be pulling vinca and ivy, as much of it as possible.
Nick, I might need your expertise.
I mean, I don't know that there's any expertise really to be shared. I think it's just one of those things. You got to pull it and bag it and then fill in those spaces with something that's going to stay.
I attended a lecture today at Holden about composting, and it's been something that's been in the back of my mind. I've been wanting to get involved with it, and so Earth Day seems like a good way for me to get going on this project and start making some moves to affect that change. So that's what I'm doing.
I love it.
So I've been pulling garlic mustard and will for a couple more weeks at some of the Stark County parks. And also tomorrow, the Western Reserve Land Conservancy is having a cleanup, like a trash and invasive species removal cleanup on a couple of their trails. So I'm going to do that.
Nice. I was going to lead a bird walk where I take people around and talk about habitat and the way that the birds interact with the native species. Unfortunately, it looks like it got rained out. But I have another one coming up on May 12th. And so hopefully we'll have even more warblers and stuff here for that. But my favorite thing in the world to talk about. So I might be a little bit late, but that was my plan.
Cool. My daughter saw a yellow warbler today at Tinker's Creek.
Oh, nice.
So that's the first warbler of the family for this season.
Great.
Very cool. Well, I think most people know I'm going to be volunteering this weekend, so I don't think I have anything else to add. Anybody else before we move on? All right. Nick, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to share with everyone what's going on with Onaway Elementary School and maybe what steps we can take to help you guys out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is my daughter's school. She's been there since kindergarten. And the gardens really are, the brainchild, if you will, of the art teacher at Onaway, Tim Callan, who does a lot of work with Friends of Lower Lake and works along the Doan Brook, serves on the Shaker Heights City Tree Advisory Board, and also helps out with the NOMO sites that we've been working on over the last year. So has a huge presence in terms of trying to build more equitable spaces and native habitat around the city. And so I think 7 years ago or so, he launched Garden Club and got some limited funding from the Schools Foundation to, get, I don't know if it was plugs or small plants, but started with a sort of basic layout, and grew into what it is today fairly quickly, it seems. And over the last couple of years, I've been helping out in terms of taking volunteer plants out of there and giving them away to other projects, or he donates probably a good $1,000 or $2,000 worth of plants to the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes homegrown sale every year. So that's in June. And it's all the plants that he grows up on his driveway in pots, basically, are just extras pulled from these gardens. And then he's got gardens at Lomond Elementary and Shaker as well. So he's done a ton of work within the city, just around native gardening. And then, of course, this serves as part of the curriculum with students, where they learn about pollinators and they learn about habitat, they learn about host plant relationships, and all of those great things, especially at grades 3 and 4, to be learning those sorts of things that most people learning much later in life, it seems. So I think there's probably always been a little bit of tension between the garden club and the facilities people, but it hasn't resulted in anything of substance. And on Friday, he was essentially told that to get ready for the centennial, which is coming up, they intended to essentially clear out the beds and pay Turfscape, a landscaper, to clear out the beds, design kind of generic beds that are maintenance free or low maintenance, inoffensive, and that if you wanted an alternative space, essentially they offered to move the beds. I don't know logistically how one would do that, to an area behind the dumpsters at the school. So he got that news on Friday morning in a meeting with the head of facilities for the district and the current principal at Onaway. Shared that information with a handful of people, and I got that out to as many people as I could in the coming days. Board meeting on Tuesday that was well attended by families. Many current Onaway students or former Onaway students spoke about the garden club and spoke about the importance of native pollinators and these native gardens. And the principal put out a statement essentially saying that there's going to be a delay in the implementation of the plan, but essentially didn't deviate from the plan as described to him, in terms of they've been offered an alternate space, and we need to clean these up for the centennial, essentially. So as far as I can tell, I certainly wouldn't rest easy that these beds are going to be there the next time I walk by the school. So from that standpoint, I intend to continue to call for them to stand where they are, and if anything, to use institutional power not to, criticize the work of a dedicated community member and educator and parent and students, but instead use that institutional power to do something to help, which, might be organize some summer cleanup events, for example, ask for people to come together once a month on a Sunday and, pull dandelions or whatever happens to be popping up that's undesirable. So I'm disappointed that instead of using the opportunity to build community, they've used the opportunity to really destroy something and tear apart community, and further divide, people in power from those who don't have power, both humans who don't have power, but of course, all of the hundreds of thousands of organisms that call these spaces home. It seems like a silly thing to be doing in terms of the effect on the community, and it seems a silly thing to be doing financially, to be paying some generic contractor, landscaper, X number of thousands of dollars to undo all of the beneficial work that's been done over the last 6 or 7 years. I don't really know who benefits from that, aside from the landscaper who gets this extra business from this project. It honestly makes no sense. And certainly I'm disappointed that in a community that, generally speaking, I think is pretty, looks to the future, tries to be progressive, and tries to think about diversity and equity and inclusion and justice, that really, this is an anti-science and, really anti many things approach to the natural world. So yeah, as far as what tangible steps people can take, I mean, I think, letting your voices be heard and letting the science speak for what it says, I think is super important. Because it's not just about the plants and the community of organisms there. It's also about the education that's involved and all the opportunities to get students to learn things that they otherwise wouldn't learn, and also learn things in a hands-on, experiential, impactful way. To be able to have that kind of impact on the world around you at 5th grade or 3rd grade and 4th grade, really pretty unique, and something that ought to be celebrated rather than criticized and undone in a very disrespectful and horrendous way. So I don't know, it's about all I can think to say at the moment, without being impolite.
Yeah, and Nick, yeah, you can tell that the kids that attended and spoke out in that, at that meeting, a lot of them were very upset. And I know that's only a small group of the kids that are currently participating or have participated in the garden club and with their classes with regards to this location. So I'm very, very sorry to hear that. So my question for you, Nick, is Wild Ones has actually a lot of procedures on different things that can be done to possibly help these situations. And obviously, sometimes stopping these events, especially if they own the land or, things like that, can be very hard. But there's anything from reaching out to the community and doing protests and media and, other things that we can possibly do to, unfortunately, certain situations like we might have to do with LCC, it sounds like, where we might just need to arrange a rescue effort to either move and or salvage what we can, but still maybe possibly trying to make more of the local community aware of what's going on to hopefully make it more difficult for future activities like this to happen, and being swept under the rug. So my question for you, Nick, is what can we do, or what would you like to possibly see from Wild Ones to assist you? Because at the same time, we also don't want to step on your toes. And especially since one of the individuals involved is also a teacher. So I want to be cognizant of that.
I mean, the kids were great after the board meeting. That was Tuesday night. Yesterday morning, they went ahead and had a protest at 8:30 in the morning before school started. And so everybody who came to school yesterday was greeted by, protesters with signs marching and chanting, and they marched over to the administration building as well. And, they did a really nice job of that. I have some, photos that people sent me and videos that I'll share with you. But yeah, I mean, my hope is that there'll just be continued light that is, shown upon this, so that people are fully aware of what's going on. And so if somebody is, sort of foolish enough to proceed with this, that there's no possible way that they can hide from the spotlight that's on them. And I think I think that's the best anybody can ask for, to sort of highlight injustices being done, who's doing them, and and make that clear to everybody in the community and outside of the community. And I think it's one of those situations where I think it highlights the need for a more unified approach to education and gardening and native plants in particular. And in the same way that I keep, fighting for the city to adopt clear guidelines around what kind of plants they plant and why. And the same way that I keep harassing developers and businesses either before they build or after they build to have some guidelines around these things. I think it highlights the need for more intentionality around planting, and also a recognition that, the default approach to any land that you own, that you're going to plant with stuff should be start with natives. And, that should just be the default. If you're going to spend money on new landscaping, it needs to be native. And if it's not, then you better have a damn good reason why it isn't. But I think in the absence of clear guidelines and in the absence of knowledge too, like I think that's the other thing that's really lacking here is that, my impression is that most adults, children probably as well, they might be able to say something like save the bees, or they might be able to say something about pollinators or about plants, but there's very little, it seems, recognition or appreciation for the kind of specialized relationships that exist between native plants and native fauna. And I think that's a problem in situations like this, because, we have board members who are, in some cases, educators themselves, and certainly well-educated, who, aside from sharing a couple of nice things to say about gardening or about plants, really have no awareness or appreciation for why this space matters, and why all the things in it matter. And obviously that is a problem when people in power don't have any clue about these things, and they're tasked with making decisions and managing budgets in these spaces. And so, my solution to that personally, which I've, said to some of the powers that be, is essentially, you seem to break down barriers between people. If you sent an administrator out to these garden spaces while students were working in them, or while their teacher was working in them, that administrator, over the course of 30 minutes with those kids among these plants and among these pollinators, could learn like what's going on. What's this plant? Why is it here? What does it matter? What's that butterfly that's landing here? So I think that's what needs to happen: more community building, more engagement, and breaking down barriers between, people and between people and insects. And so that's what I'll continue to advocate for in this situation. I don't want to, attack people in terms of their personal character or anything else like that. I'm just interested in, stopping people from doing incredibly ignorant things, and incredibly harmful things.
Okay. So Nick, I love your idea of, perhaps, starting to work on things like city guidelines or other things. And I think that's something we could easily would want to include as a part of, say, that pathway project, when we're looking at those other layers, when we're looking at city or campuses, or maybe it's, schools and other things. I think that's something we could easily look at. And I think that is our intention. Well, like I said, maybe not at the very, very beginning, because we're focusing on the, people's more individual houses, but even at a certain point, that we're going to even want to talk about that too, at the individual homes, like, to be a part of the pathway, do we want certain percentages, or, other something more than recommendations and stuff. So love to hear your input on some of that. With regards, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
So with regards to Onaway Elementary specifically, is there any protests or that we can help with? Is there any messages that we could help, like that you've already crafted, that perhaps we can share on your behalf to make people more aware? Is there anything else along those lines that we can more immediately help you with?
I think imminently there should be, some publications about this, or published articles about this, hopefully, or statements that you can share. I think, probably would be wise of me to put together like a change.org petition. Just
I was going to ask you about
it.
that, if one had already been started or not.
Just to have it. I think the most powerful thing so far has been the outpouring of support from community members. And I know they've been inundated all of them with emails and phone calls and pleas from people in person and electronically. But shifting gears to a wider audience and a louder message, frankly, I think, that's probably all to the good. And ultimately, like, I know I can't speak for Tim, the teacher here. I mean, Tim's amazing, and I probably wouldn't be talking to you if not for Tim, in the sense that, he taught me a lot of the things that I know about native plants by helping him in these gardens, learning what things were and what things were desirable, what things were aggressive, what things hosted, what insects. So, I have a personal connection with him and with these gardens as a result. But I mean, I would just say that I think the goal for me is much bigger than just Onaway. I think, these situations happen all over the place, and they happen to all kinds of people. And depending on how savvy they are at raising the alarm, they're either allowed to stand or not. And so my hope is to, have sort of a united front in situations like this, so that, soil and water districts and conservation groups spring into action and essentially send a clear message that, what you're doing is anti-science, it's also unjust, and we're not going to stand for it, and we're paying attention. And I think, rather than responding to all these situations individually and making up a playbook every time, I think there just needs to be like a clear path every time one of these situations come up that you can put into play, if that makes any sense.
No, actually, I was gonna say, Nick, that makes a ton of sense. And leaving details out, I'm actually in the exact same boat as you and have been for a while. And it's a real kind of nasty situation. And I've been in discussion with Jessica on several different steps and several different goals leading to several different outcomes. But the main objective is that bigger protocol, is that bigger collection, proving community in terms of what the community wants in the form of data, because you cannot always change a paradigm. You cannot always get more than 30 seconds of a listening ear. But a lot of that can be translated into data. And so that's actually something that we are working on behind the scenes that we haven't spoke a lot about, because things are really dicey right now. And there's a lot of kind of sharp edges that we have to be skirted around. But I would love to have you in on that conversation as we make progress on that. Because I'm right there with you, and I've got the same exact train of thought. And it's something that we are trying to manifest and create kind of a blanket, just not just protocol, but kind of overwhelming evidence, not just for the economic or the ecological benefits, because they may or may not listen, but make it so big that whatever they're into, it will all come back to the benefit of these spaces, which honestly, a lot of times will be economics, like that. So just so that you know, that is something that we feel very passionately about, and we are working diligently to create. It's just that unfortunately it's happening to me at the same time as it is for you. So it's all very new, and we're not going to have that infrastructure just yet. We've only just started to create it. But like you said, you have your goals for Onaway, but you want it to be bigger and you want it to reach farther. So we'd love to have you on board in those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, count me in for sure. The other thing I would say is, in my limited experience here, and I try to bring this up whenever I have a chance, but I think one of the other problems is that some of the conservation groups that we go to in situations like this, their own materials or their own mission or agendas don't always make things very clear. So, I've highlighted, for example, like the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, I did their tree steward program. 99% of the conversations around trees and tree canopy has to do with, things that any tree whatsoever, doesn't matter, would provide. And so when you have, these top-notch organizations that are doing really great things, who seem either unaware of the need to own this stuff or just are unwilling to, I think that's problematic too. And so, when you've got a place like Holden Arboretum or Western Reserve Land Conservancy, various metro parks, ODNR, all those things, like I think it's really important to say, like, you should be planting native trees for X, Y, and Z. These are the reasons, because otherwise it becomes this very generic, bees are good, pollinators are good, flowers are pretty, gardening is fun, trees are nice to have because they give us shade. And so it's this like generic word jumble that gets thrown around by these organizations. And I don't think ultimately it really helps move the needle. And so that's the other thing too. Like I would say, I know you got your hands full, Jessica, but one of my other hopes is that, if you look at the money that's involved in landscaping, and I think about the Cleveland Clinic, for example, or other big organizations, whether it's Tri-C, CSU, John Carroll, Case Western, walk around and look at the landscaping, look at what they're paying for, look at what they're paying for people to maintain, and then go pull up their statements about diversity and equity and inclusion and sustainability. And there's a clear disconnect there, either because they're not aware of it, or because they're aware of it and they don't care about it, or because they're aware of it and they don't know how to do it. But any of those things is a problem. And I think that's a problem that needs to be confronted head on. And I think, it's great that I have neighbors that, love these gardens, that they themselves want natives in their pollinator pathways. They want natives in their backyard. They want to ask me what kind of native canopy tree to put on their front yard. That's all great, but it's also very easy to ignore or to write off as some, kook across the street who's, a tree hugger. And so I think from an institutional change standpoint and a real normalization of some of these concepts, you got to start working on those organizations, either calling them out or quietly working with them. I personally like to loudly call them out. That's my preferred method of doing things, but I think that has to happen and somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And Holden's not doing it. Western Reserve Land Conservancy is not doing it. The Natural History Museum's not doing it. I walk around Wade Oval and, the whole place is filled with invasive species in planned beds and out of it. And so where's Holden in that? Where's the Natural History Museum in that? Where's all these other organizations that are supposedly looking out for these issues? And instead, here's me, a random guy who hasn't taken a science class since 1996, who's like, oh, that's a problem that you've got a ton of invasive species there. You might want to do something about it. So that's would be my hope for somebody to take on and have the courage to engage with people, because those places aren't even like having volunteers work on those spaces. They're paying tons of money to make sure that their spaces look that way, which is amazing to think of. But it's not, and in some cases they're using lots of taxpayer money for it as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity for lots of progress by holding people accountable for the things that they claim are near and dear to them in terms of how they operate and approach the world.
Yeah, no, Nick, those are all, and Danielle, those are all great ideas. Obviously, we've been talking on the download just because we hadn't announced the LCC part yet due to its sensitivity. But the way I see it is broken up in three different ways. Obviously, we have the more urgent situation about the two immediate rescue or attempt at rescue situations. My question for you with regards to that, and this is actually to Danielle too, now that we've announced the one and now we have a second situation, do we feel that we want to pull together sort of a rescue team to help with these two situations? Or do you guys have too much on your plate to help with something like that? Because I do understand that as well because of your respective jobs and community involvement. I'd be happy to do that, but obviously it would have to involve at least one or if not both of you. only because you guys, it's the more immediate situation is both of your situations, so.
Well, I am moving into more of an advocacy role in this group, so I'd be happy to kind of combine forces and stuff and just add that to, or, my workload and make some adjustments and everything, because that's just what's happening. Are you talking like a committee or?
I'm leaning towards either a committee for the long term, but I don't know if we're quite ready yet based off of availability and what we need to, do to help you guys immediately. But at the very least, more of a project team to immediately take care of these, like get the race for volunteers, pull together people if we need to start making some articles. I know somebody actually reached out to us to know what plants are at the Onaway location because they wanted to possibly write something up, so like there's people interested besides people that might be on this call that might be able to help with that, but we'd have to make that call to pull together those resources. But I don't want to do it without either of you because obviously this is about your guys' two projects. Now, if you guys, need to do your own thing for these two immediate, I respect that as well, but we want to make sure we're supporting it. No matter what, in the long term, I would like to see a committee. I just also respect if we don't have either the resources or the time commitment available, depending on, especially your guys' experience, because even if these two situations were not going on, you guys have an immense amount of experience with regards to these topics, and I would want you guys to be a part of that. So, I mean, Danielle, Nick, actually, and the team. I mean, everyone that's on the line, I just love to hear your guys' thoughts as to if we should possibly start something like this up sooner than later. I know we have a lot on our plates, but I mean, these are two things that have just happened in the last month. And there's probably more going on that we're not aware of. So, but I will say I can't lead it just because I have already taken a lead on a few other situations, but I'm happy to be a part of it and help guide it. And I can definitely tell you one or two pieces that both, especially Nick, some of the things you called out is stuff I would like to make sure we include as a part of the Pathway project, because I think that's a great way to introduce some of those recommended guidelines and more specific pieces of information and introduce it as we get into the next set of levels, and starting to work with the community and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just count me in on whatever. I mean, especially anything that prioritizes action over talking. So, I mean, I'm not a big meeting person, unless it serves a real clear purpose. So
I was about to say stuff like the committees and stuff are going to be a lot of meetings, but at the same time, it's creating material or figuring out the action plans to, do that type of stuff. So.
But I mean, your question about what's in the beds, I mean, that's a good one, and that's something that I'll ask Tim.
Yeah, and I've at least had one person ask me about that. And
I mean, he has a lot of tags that were paid for when he first installed the gardens, so some of those are in place still, but then he's added more things over the years, and so at some point over the next couple of days I'll get with him. My hope was to put together a list of species and then attach that to a list from like the National Wildlife Federation or Xerces to kind of make those connections between whose interests or whose needs are being served by these spaces as they exist now, as far as caterpillars, butterflies, moths, beetles, bees, wasps, whatever, but essentially try to kind of quantify that in a way that I think will be pretty impressive if you start talking about just how much life is supported by these spaces as they exist right now.
Diane, did I see that you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to comment on this whole idea of, being able to talk through these different issues. I mean, you guys have much more serious issues than I do. I just think down here, nobody even knows what we're even talking about in Akron. Like, there just aren't enough native plants at all, but I mean, I'm not a big activist. I don't go to protests. I don't know how to do that. So I can't offer any particular, guidance, but I would be willing to help. That's basically all I wanted to say, and to learn and to be part of, pushing these things, in a group, in a group, and to be on, if it's a committee or whatever, I would be there to support and help and learn and do what we need to do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say from an activist standpoint, I wouldn't have ever considered myself an activist, but literally last January 2022, the school district announced this plan that was going to call for not only the closing of, but the demolition of all of the elementary schools except for, I think, one of them, and then building one giant building for everybody. So this 100-year-old building here that you're looking at was going to be deemed too old to maintain, or too old to deal with going forward. And so I joked on Facebook when somebody brought up the horrendous ideas for the centennial around these gardens. I said, well, to be fair, their idea for the centennial last summer was to demolish the building. So maybe this is progress, that they're only demolishing the gardens in front of the building instead. So I mean, that's what got me really connected with a lot of the city leaders and school board and school administrators, just in terms of getting me to the point where I wanted to attend community meetings and stand up and speak truth to power. And so I've been doing that since, and I do that at every opportunity I get, whether it's the mayor or the superintendent or school board members or whoever else. I mean, it's one of those things you kind of do enough, and then you kind of figure out how to handle it. And I think it's been pretty effective, generally speaking, and my hope is that it will be effective in this situation as well.
I applaud you.
Anybody else have anything they want to add? All right, so obviously there's gonna be a lot of takeaways from this. I'm gonna continue to talk with Nick and Danielle offline with regards to this topic, but it does sound like we're gonna start either a project team or committee sooner than later to help with the immediate needs, and then possibly some other documentation or other things. So more information to come. And just like with the other volunteering opportunities, if there is, if you're interested in being a part of that conversation sooner than later, raise your hand, send us an email or message us. We'd love you to add you to the list. With regards to calls to action, just want to remind everyone, please share the Earth Day events on Facebook. I've interesting conversation I've had with regards to people in the last couple days, whether it's Facebook or emails. Let's start with the email part. Check your spam. We're pretty good about sending members emails once or twice a month about, usually one is an update for the general for the month. We're not always the best about getting it early in the month, but we do our best to get that out. And sometimes there's some individual ones with regards to meeting invites or things going on with regards to the chapter. So please make sure that's not hitting your spam, because we want to make sure you guys are aware. And as a part of that conversation I had with a member or two, some people were saying, oh, well, we're not really seeing you on Facebook. Well, make sure you have liked us and or followed us. Also, if you don't like some of our posts occasionally or make comments, it deprioritizes us. So we're pretty good, or at least I'm pretty good about making, I'd say, anywhere from 5 to 7 posts in a week, a little bit less on the Instagram side. So we always have a lot going on. Sometimes it's informational, sometimes it's activities like, or things to be aware of, like the Onaway or Earth Day. But just be sure to do that. Also, if you want to prioritize us higher in your social media feed, specifically with regards to Facebook, if you click on the 3 dots near the top of the main page and you select the follow option, which should already be selected if you have followed or liked us in the past, and you have an option to prioritize it. And I think there's about 3 or 4 options, and one of those options is a favorite. So I just want to put that out there because I thought it was interesting that literally, I think it's in the last 2 days, I've had 2 or 3 people specifically say something along those lines with regards to either emails or Facebook. So we're really trying to be good about that. We want to make sure you guys are aware of what's going on. Next, if you're not a member, please feel free to join us. Those membership fees go towards activities, as well as, since we're a nonprofit organization, those are tax deductible. So it just, helps with the mission. And at the national level, it helps with tech support to the grants that they give out, educational opportunities, things along those lines. Also, Earth Day, this time of year with Arbor Day, Earth Day, everything else, this is a really great time to have those conversations with friends and family members about wild ones. So feel free to, let them know about us, maybe send them an invite with regards to either Facebook or Instagram, or invite them to the information session that's coming up on Monday, May 1st. And once again, volunteer. Every little bit helps, guys. Whether it's tabling, whether it's volunteering for a position, or providing your input to committees like the Pathway Project, Learning Committee, or our, I don't know how we want to refer to it, but maybe it's Plant Rescue Committee. So like I said, so any questions with regards to the calls to action? Okay, well, I know we're at time, but I did promise that, we'd leave a few minutes at the end. Sorry, we had that special topic, but I think it was very important to have that conversation. So any other questions, any other topics somebody wants to bring up at this time, please feel free to stay on the line. Nick, thank you again for sharing your situation. Steph, thank you for pulling together that presentation on the history of Earth Day. So I'm opening up the floor, guys. Anything else?
No.
I can just share really quickly. You mentioned, Julie, I took a group of students to Meadow City yesterday to help get things ready. And it's really impressive to see how much has changed since the time I was there back in December, helping to remove some of those invasive white mulberry trees. So super excited to see how that space continues to develop and, open up over the next, month or so.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know we're hoping to do a tour once she's a little bit more up and running. Did they finish up with fences? I know that's one of the big things that took them a lot longer than expected.
Oh yeah, all the fencing is up, and then we were helping smother some areas for some of the gardens, and then prep the area for the driveway in there. So things are coming along really, really nicely, just in terms of transforming that space. So yeah, I think it's gonna look great and soon.
Great. Anything else, guys? All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for your attendance, your thoughts and input. So really excited what's going on. And if we missed anything, or if you need to talk about anything offline, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if nothing else, we'll be talking again next month. All right. Thanks, guys.